If you have trouble keeping your knees out on the sumo deadlift, or if your hips shoot up, then this video is for you. Hey everyone, it's Anand from underdogstrength.com, and if you're new to my channel, then make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. Now the sumo deadlift is great because it gives you a lot of leverage in terms of bringing your hips closer to the bar, and then when you do that it can potentially help you lift more weight. But the problem is, if you cannot maintain this position, then it defeats the purpose of having a better leverage overall. Now, in my coaching experience, I've seen that there's a lot of lifters who actually dip their hips very low, and this causes the hips to shoot up. And this is perfectly normal because your hips will start at the position where your shoulders or your scapula is directly over the barbell. But if you're already in this position, and if your knees are still caving in, and if your hips are still shooting up before the barbell starts to move or breaks off the floor, then this is an issue. And for this reason, I highly encourage you guys to always film your lifts, especially on the deadlifts. Make sure to film yourself from the front and from the side, or directly from the side, because this will give you a lot of data in terms of where your technique is breaking down. And you want to pay attention to your hips and when the barbell actually breaks the floor. If your hips are moving before the barbell moves the floor, then all the energy that you're potentially putting in to the barbell is actually not causing the barbell to move at all. So that's wasted energy right there, and you're also losing your position of leverage. Now, I just competed last weekend, and as you can see in my videos here, my sumo deadlift form isn't quite perfect. One of the reasons is that I've got super long femurs or super long legs, so I'm gonna have a higher hip position than most people. Also, my hip mobility isn't that good, and unlike a lot of people who can simply drive their knees out all the way to their sides, I simply can't do that. In spite of that, I could do a better job in terms of maintaining my position, but as you can see, I'm leaking so much power here that by the time I got to my final attempt, my form really broke down. And even though my hips were kind of shooting up, I just couldn't maintain that leverage in terms of helping me move the weight off the floor, and I failed the lift because I simply could not break the floor. So what do you do? Well, the solution to this is, or at least one of the best solutions, is to do what is known as tempo sumo deadlifts. And if you don't know what tempo sumo deadlifts is, it's basically a way of controlling the movement by using a slower tempo than usual. Now, when most people do deadlifts, and what I recommend is that when you set the barbell down, this is known as the eccentric part of the movement. And for deadlifts, it's pretty much a concentric only movement, where what I mean is, when you lift the weight, you're applying force to the bar, but when you lower the bar, you don't really lower it under control. And this is because of a variety of reasons, including, on a deadlift you typically lift a lot of heavier weights, and if you try to control the weight too much, then it's gonna cause you to it can cause some injuries potentially. Also, the deadlifts, you're setting the bar onto the floor pretty much between each rep. So, and I actually don't recommend that you do any sort of touch and go reps. And for this reason, it's again a good idea to just simply not control the lowering part of the movement too much, and just set it on the floor, reset, and then do your next rep. And also, the deadlift is a very fatiguing exercise, probably the most fatiguing exercise of all of them, because you're lifting so much weight and you're stressing out your nervous system quite a bit. It's harder to recover from. So if you're trying to do deadlifts with slow eccentrics, then that can cause a lot of fatigue and stress on your body, and can also make it very hard for you to recover from. But if your goal is to improve your technique, then this is where tempo sumo deadlifts comes into play. And first of all, I recommend that you use very light weights. And if you do regular sumo deadlifts as part of your program, you can even do this just as part of your warm up, because first of all it's going to warm you up like no other exercise because it's very specific to the movement. The other thing is that it's going to activate all the right muscles that you need to maintain proper form, including you're keeping your activating your hips, keeping your knees out, keeping your abductors activated, your glutes activated. All of these muscles are important. It's also going to train you and ingrain the correct movement patterns for you, because on the deadlift especially, your technique and your movement patterns are very important, because if it's off even by a little bit, it increases your chances of injury. So I recommend that you only do this with super light weights. Start with about 50% of the weight that you would normally use on your regular deadlift set, and while warming up you can even do this with just one plate if you wanted to. And the kind of tempo that I recommend is basically a 303 tempo or 303 tempo, where you you take about 3 seconds or 3 counts to raise the bar off the floor and lock it out. And then you don't really have to hold the barbell at the top for any for a longer period of time, and then you just lower the bar, but this time control it and take about 3 seconds or so to lower it as well, and this counts as one rep. And then you can set the bar on the floor and repeat if you wanted to do more reps, but that's basically a 303 tempo. If you're a complete beginner and if you think 303 is too hard for you, then you can even do a 202 tempo. But this is actually, it doesn't look very hard because the weight is light, but it's actually much harder than it seems, simply because of the time under tension. So you can do a lot of reps on the deadlifts if you're not controlling the movement, but once you start controlling it, your time under tension goes up for each rep and you can't really perform a lot of reps over here. Another thing to keep in mind is that you can use a belt if you wanted to, but I would say try to avoid using a belt, because when you put on a belt you typically tend to lift more weight, and that kind of defeats the purpose in terms of maintaining proper technique. So I recommend that you do this beltless as well, but don't go very heavy to a point where you get injured or anything like that. And typically you can stick to lower reps. I would say doing about 5 reps or so is pretty good, especially if you're doing a 303 tempo where you're taking 3 seconds on the way up, 3 seconds on the way down. So each rep is going to be about 6-7 seconds for you, and so even if you do 5 reps, that's gonna be about 30 seconds for each set. And once you do this and you go back to doing your regular sets, you're gonna find a huge difference in terms of your technique. You're gonna find that your technique is way more efficient. Although I would say over time, especially if you start lifting heavier and heavier, your body is still gonna default to its strongest position. And for me, the strongest position is more of a conventional position, and that's why I've been experimenting a little bit with a narrower sumo or a semi-sumo stance. This is another way for you to improve your deadlift form. If you feel like your knees are caving in, then chances are that you're using a stance that is too wide for you, and you might want to consider a slightly narrower stance. There are also other ways of improving your deadlift technique, such as doing pause deadlifts, but that's a topic for another video, and I'll definitely make another video on this topic. But for this video, I encourage you to try some sumo or some pause sumo deadlifts with a 303 tempo at least once a week. And even if it's not part of your program, then you can try it as a warm-up. Let me know in the comment section down below if you ever tried any sort of sumo deadlifts or sumo tempo deadlifts before. And if you have not watched my complete tutorial on how to deadlift properly, then click on the link on the right side of the screen. And if you have any questions, make sure to leave a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching, and stay strong.